2006. The Iraq War was at its most volatile. South of Baghdad lay a region so treacherous, so riddled with insurgents and IEDs, that soldiers called it the Triangle of Death. Here, survival wasn't measured in months. It was measured in footsteps. But in the spring of that year, the most horrific act of the war wouldn't be committed by an insurgent. It wouldn't be a roadside bomb or sniper's bullet. It would happen at Checkpoint 4, a tiny, isolated guard post manned by 5 soldiers from the legendary 101st Airborne. On the night of March 12th, the air was thick with the smell of sand, cheap whiskey, and a boredom that had turned into something poisonous. Inside a small shack, 4 men were playing cards and drinking a lethal concoction of alcohol and energy drinks. One of them, 19-year-old Stephen Dale Green, looked out toward a farmhouse just 200 yards away. He didn't see a family, he saw a target. This is the story of the Black Hearts. A story of how discipline collapsed, how a monster was recruited into the ranks, and the night a family was erased from existence. To understand the crime, we have to understand the environment that birthed it. The first platoon, Bravo Company, was falling apart. They were under strength, under-rested, and losing men weekly. The psychological toll was astronomical, but Stephen Dale Green was different. Even before he arrived in Iraq, there were red flags. Green had been a high school dropout with a string of arrests for alcohol and drug possession. Normally, the army wouldn't touch him, but in 2005, the military was desperate for boots on the ground. They issued a moral waiver, essentially looking the other way so Green could enlist. His fellow soldiers described him as a void. He didn't have hobbies. He had an obsession with death. He would sit at the checkpoint and watch the local Iraqis through his scope, narrating their lives as if they were already dead. He once told a comrade, "I want to kill Iraqis like I'm swatting flies." The military's leadership failed to see that they hadn't just recruited a soldier. They had armed a sociopath and placed him in a pressure cooker. March 12th, 9:00 p.m. Green, along with Sergeant Paul Cortez, Specialist James Barker, and Private Jesse Spielman, decided to go hunting. They didn't take their uniforms. They changed into black civilian clothes to blend into the night. They abandoned their post, an act of desertion that could have seen their comrades killed, and walked toward the Al-Janabi house. Inside were Hamid, his wife Fakhriya, their 6-year-old daughter Hadil, and 14-year-old Aber. They were sleeping. The soldiers broke in with the clinical efficiency they had been taught for raids. Green took the lead. He forced the parents and the 6-year-old into a bedroom. Without a word, he executed them. Barker and Cortez later testified that they heard the shots and saw Green walk out, casually wiping his face. The horror that followed for Aber is the reason this case remains the darkest chapter of the occupation. After brutalizing the girl, Green ended her life. To hide the evidence, they poured kerosene over her and set the house ablaze. They thought the fire would consume their sins. For 3 months, the secret held. The army blamed the Sunni insurgents. The soldiers went back to their duties, eating in the same mess halls as men who had no idea they were sitting next to mass murderers. But you cannot commit an act like this and stay whole. The cracks began with Specialist Justin Watt. He wasn't at the house that night, but he heard the Black Hearts bragging. The guilt ate at him until he couldn't breathe. He went to a military counselor and told them everything. The investigation was explosive. Investigators found the Gatorade bottle at the scene. It was a 21st century smoking gun. The DNA on the rim belonged to Stephen Dale Green. Because Green had been honorably discharged for a personality disorder before the crime was discovered, he was a civilian when the handcuffs finally snapped shut. He became the first U.S. soldier tried under the Military Extraterritorial Jurisdiction Act. In a federal court, the warrior image vanished, leaving only a small, broken man facing the reality of his actions. The sentences were heavy. Life without parole for Green, 90 to 100 years for the others. In 2014, Stephen Dale Green was found hanging in his prison cell, a final, lonely end to a life defined by violence. The Mahmoudiya massacre remains a warning. It is a story about what happens when the black hearts are allowed to lead, when red flags are ignored for the sake of numbers, and when the line between soldier and monster disappears in the desert heat. If you believe these stories need to be told so they are never repeated, subscribe to your channel name. And as always, stay vigilant.